I started my own business at 14, paid off my debts, and bought a house in cash. Then my parents sued me for taking the life my brother deserved and tried to sabotage what I'd built. I fought back and made sure they regret it. The faint, metallic odor of solder was the only scent of home I ever knew, a world away from the grease and resentment that stained the rest of the house. I was Eddie, age 30, but for the first 18 years of my life, I was just the quiet kid in the basement. My older brother, Adrien, was the son my parents orbited. He was the golden child, captain of the JV football team, and fluent in the language of smiles and easy compliments. I was the opposite, awkward, focused on circuits, and always getting the same question thrown at me like a curse. Why can't you be more like Adrien? Growing up in Fairmont, Ohio, was about as exciting as staring at a blank screen. The town was built on the remains of manufacturing plants that had been dying since before I was born. My dad worked maintenance at one of the few remaining factories, coming home with that deep, oily scent of cut metal and complaining about overtime getting slashed. My mom worked the register part-time at the grocery store, mostly for the employee discount on food we could barely afford anyway. Money was always tight. The bills were always stacked on the kitchen counter. Past due notices mixed in with the junk mail. When I was supposed to be obsessed with baseball scores or school dances, I was assessing over how things worked. I took apart old VCRs, radios, and anything with a circuit board. This did not make me popular at home. I can still see the look my father would give me when he found the kitchen table covered in the broken guts of a television. Disappointment so deep it felt personal. The only place I didn't feel like an expensive waste of space was the shop class. Mr. D'Angelo, the shop teacher, was the only adult who truly saw me. He'd let me stay after school, teaching me proper soldering techniques, how to trace electrical faults, and the practical application of the physics I loved. My cousin, Felix Moreno, was the only family member who didn't treat me like a disappointment. He was a year older, worked at his dad's auto shop, and had this quiet way of making tense family dinners bearable. With a well-timed joke. He knew how to read a room, and unlike my parents, he read me correctly. Everything changed one afternoon when I was 14. Our neighbor, Mr. Kowalski, was tossing out an ancient, blocky point of sales system from his hardware store. It was probably from the early 2000s, heavy, dusty, and definitely broken. He laughed when I asked if I could take it. He said the repair guy quoted $300, so he just bought a new one. I dragged the heavy thing into our damp, dimly lit basement, and that machine became my entire world. For the next month, I lived down there, surrounded by technical manuals I'd found online and YouTube videos showing how to troubleshoot outdated systems. Our nosy neighbor, Mrs. Peppers, would sometimes poke her head in, bringing me snacks and asking about the people in the neighborhood who had other broken electronics. When I finally got that POS system humming, processing test transactions, the victory felt immense. Mr. Kowalski saw it working when he came over to borrow my dad's ladder, and he mentioned it to Rick, the owner of the auto parts store on Main Street. Next thing I knew, Rick was standing on our doorstep offering me $50 to look at his freezing shop system. I fixed it in 2 hours. It was a simple software issue, a corrupted database that needed rebuilding. Rick was impressed and paid me $75 instead. You explained it so I actually understood what was wrong, he said. That's worth something. In a small town, that kind of word spreads fast. Within a month, I was setting up inventory tracking for a contractor, supply shop, and modernizing the parts system for a local garage. These were all blue-collar businesses running on ancient, barely functional equipment. They couldn't afford the big, corporate $1,000 solutions. Slept. But they would happily pay a teenager a few $100s to keep their systems running. I set up a shop in the basement, using a workbench I snagged from a yard sale. By age 15, I was bringing home $300 or $400 every week. My parents of the action was swift and predictable. My dad initially complained about the equipment taking up space. But when I brought home $600 that first month, suddenly they were interested. My mom took half of it. She said, I needed to contribute to the household, to start paying my way. I was still a kid, but arguing was useless. So, I started keeping 2 sets of books. They could take their cut from what I showed them. The rest went into a lockbox hidden behind the hot water heater. Meanwhile, Adrien got new everything for school, and gas money whenever he asked. My business was just a phase I'd grow out of, but the price of my quiet ambition was already being set. I thought by paying the rent, I had bought myself peace. I was wrong. The paper trail that arrived in the mail proved I had only paid for my own cage. My business kept growing, though. By the time I was 16, I was making more than my mom's part-time job brought in. I'd hired Felix to help with the installations. He was a year older than me, good with his hands, and importantly, he knew how to talk to the business owners without sounding like a kid or a robot. We split the job 70-30, and he was happy for the extra cash while I kept building something real and reliable. That success was also my mistake. I brought home one check that was bigger than usual, $900 from setting up a full system at a plumbing supply company. I showed it to my parents' dinner, maybe looking for some small piece of recognition, or at least a brief moment where they didn't look disappointed. My dad's eyes widened, but not with pride. The next day, he sat me down with this serious, heavy look. He explained that now that I was earning real money, I needed to start contributing more. The $400 I was paying for my bedroom wasn't enough anymore. Now it was going to be household contributions. An open-ended fund for whatever the family needed. In my parents' minds, I didn't earn money. I simply possessed a resource that was rightfully theirs to manage. This became the pattern that suffocated me. It started as rent. Then it was a household contribution. Then it became whatever Adrien needed money for that month. Adrien needs books for college prep. That's coming from Eddie. The car needs new tires. Eddie's got it covered. I learned fast that in our house, there were 2 standards. Adrien's, where everything was handed to him, and mine, where everything was taken away. I built my business on the principle of reliability. Yet the most unreliable part of my life was the 2 people who raised me. The real wake-up call, the moment that shattered every single illusion I had left, came right after my 17th birthday. A credit card statement arrived in the mail. My name was on it, an account I had never opened. Then a week later, another one arrived, and then a third. 3 different credit cards, all maxed out. $28,000 of fraudulent debt in my name. I sat on my bed, staring at those numbers, my heart pounding a panicked rhythm against my ribs. I did the quick, brutal math. How long would it take minimum wage me to pay this off? The answer made me physically sick. 6 years, maybe 7, if I lived perfectly. I cornered my parents in the living room, throwing the stack of fraudulent statements down on the coffee table. My mother didn't even try to deny it. She just looked at the carpet and said Adrien needed a car for college, and they had to fix the roof. She said, my business had given us good credit, so they used it. You stole my identity. I said, the words coming out flat and dead. My dad barely looked up from the television. Don't get dramatic. It's family money anyway. You've been living here free for years. I've been paying you $400 a month for the past year, and you're stealing from me to pay for my brother's future. I stated, my voice shaking. My mother's voice was tight and cold. Think of it as your contribution to your brother's future. We've supported you for 17 years. You owe us this. That was the line. I didn't owe them anything. They didn't see me as their son. They saw me as a resource to be harvested. Adrien walked past my room later that night, and he stopped in the doorway with that familiar, entitled smirk. Thanks for the car, little bro. It was the final, careless turn of the knife. That was the moment I knew I had to get out, and not just physically. I had to achieve absolute separation. The next morning, I called Felix, and we met at the greasy diner on the edge of town. I spread the credit card statements between us on the worn table. Next, to the burnt coffee. Felix looked at the numbers, then back at me, his usual joking manner gone. Holy crap, Eddie. This is straight-up identity theft. This is illegal. They're my parents. I whispered. Doesn't matter. This is illegal as anything, and they saddled you with it. He insisted. Felix put me in touch with his mom's friend, a lawyer named Marlene, who specialized in family law and sometimes took cases pro bono. I drove to her office a few days later, dumping the papers and my lockbox of hidden statements on her desk. She looked over everything, especially the documentation proving I had been paying rent and contributing to the house. She laid out my options: press criminal charges, which would ruin them but was something I couldn't emotionally handle, or pursue legal emancipation. Emancipation would legally separate me from them before I turned 18, cutting all their control over my current and future finances. It would, however, leave me legally responsible for the $28,000 in fraudulent debt they created. I told her I wanted the emancipation. The debt was worth the freedom. Building the case took 3 brutal months of quiet documentation. I recorded conversations where my parents casually discussed using my earnings. I tracked every dollar I'd contributed. The hardest part wasn't gathering the evidence. It was the quiet, cold acceptance that I was severing the deepest connection a person has. The decision solidified when I caught my mom online, applying for a 4th credit card using my social security number. Using a family computer I'd actually fixed myself. She didn't even try to hide it when I walked in. She just closed the laptop and told me to mind my own business. She believed the resource was hers to manage until the last possible second. The only way out was to burn the bridge completely. Accepting that they were not family, but an obstacle, was the easiest part. The hardest part was turning that acceptance into a signature on a page, trading a home for a legal document. The day they were served the emancipation papers, the house immediately turned into a war zone. I wasn't there, thankfully. Marlene, my lawyer, had advised me to stay away. Felix was the one who texted me a simple 2-word message. It's chaos. When I finally saw my parents a few days later, my father's face was red, almost purple. He started screaming about betrayal and everything they had sacrificed. He paced the kitchen, shouting about the cost of my food, the electricity I used for my toys, and the nerve I had to thank them by suing them. My mother leaned against the doorway, letting the tears stream down her face in a performance that would have been convincing if I hadn't already seen the credit card statements. "How could you do this to us?" she asked, her voice shaking. "We're your family." "I'm not doing anything to you," I replied, feeling numb, not angry. "I'm protecting myself from you." Adrien, who was standing there shaking his head, with a look of utter disgust, stepped forward. "Family takes care of each other." "Funny," I said, meeting his eyes. "Funny," I said, meeting his eyes. "I don't feel very taken care of when I have $28,000 of your debt in my name." I moved out that afternoon. I couldn't bear to be in that house for the 3 weeks leading up to the hearing. Fortunately, Mr. D'Angelo's older brother, Bruce, a retired electrician who lived alone in a house that was far too big for one person, offered me his couch. It was salvation. I slept on the worn tweed sofa, ran Vanlentini Systems from his quiet, organized garage, and tried my best to ignore the constant, aggressive calls from my parents demanding I come home and drop the case. They tried everything to get to me. They called the clients I had showed them on the books, claiming I was unstable and had stolen money from them. They showed up at Bruce's house, demanding entry and claiming I was a troubled youth who needed to be returned to their custody. They even managed to get our family priest to call me, lecturing me about honoring my parents and the sanctity of family. Every single attempt failed. They were using emotional pressure and lies, and I was insulated by Bruce's patience and Marlene's airtight legal preparation. The courthouse hearing was rough, despite the strong case we had. My mother played the role of the devastated, bewildered parent perfectly. She cried about her difficult, troubled son who had always been distant. She claimed they only took control of my finances to help me, since I was just a kid who didn't understand money and was running a basement hobby. The judge, a formidable woman named Judge Torres, didn't appear to be moved. She reviewed every single document. She looked at the unauthorized credit card statements, the bank records showing consistent, large withdrawals from my accounts to pay household expenses, and the recordings Marlene had submitted. She listened carefully to my testimony about finding the $28,000 debt, and my mother applying for the fourth card. When Judge Torres delivered her verdict, her voice was sharp and clear, leaving no room for doubt. She said, "The court clearly saw a pattern of financial exploitation that made continued cohabitation impossible and unsafe for the minor." She granted the petition for legal emancipation immediately. I was 17 years old and legally an adult. It was a cold, quiet victory. I finally achieved the legal separation that debt had bought. I didn't cheer or cry. I simply felt the heavy weight of the past 11 years lift slightly, immediately replaced by the new, heavy weight of the debt. They were no longer my problem, but their fraudulent choices were. Bruce helped me find a place immediately, a converted garage apartment behind an old warehouse on the industrial side of town. It was small, cold, and perfect. I filed the paperwork establishing Vanlentini Systems as a real, legal business, complete with tax numbers. I opened bank accounts my parents couldn't touch. The reality of my new life hit hard. After rent and necessary business expenses, every single dollar went to the minimum payments on that debt. $28,000 I didn't spend, but which I was legally obligated to pay off. I made a spreadsheet, tracking the numbers religiously. The initial projection was 6 years. 6 years of my life, gone, just to pay for their car and their leaky roof. I realized then that my work wasn't just about building systems anymore. It was about earning my freedom, dollar by painful dollar. My family cut contact completely, yet their betrayal lived on in the interest accrued every month. That first Thanksgiving, I was alone, eating gas station fried chicken in my empty apartment, working on a system for a hardware store in the next town over, and wondering if I had traded one prison for another. Debt was not a number on a statement. It was a ghost that haunted every dollar I earned. A 6-year chain I had to systematically break. For the next 6 years, my life was simple, cold, and utterly dedicated to the spreadsheet. My apartment was cheap, located in the industrial part of town where the air always smelled faintly of oil and metal. Every time I made a payment, slept, I updated the cell in my spreadsheet that tracked the principal remaining. Watching that $28,000 number decrease at a glacial pace, while my business income grew, was the most frustrating kind of motivation. I calculated how many clients I needed to double the monthly payment, and how many months that would shave off the 6-year projection. I lived cheap, worked hard, and saved every cent. My family was a non-entity, but Mrs. Peppers, the nosy neighbor from my childhood, found out where I lived. She showed up at my garage apartment with a plate of homemade lasagna one Thanksgiving. She didn't ask questions about the emancipation or the family drama. She just handed me the food and told me she'd saved a stack of my mail that had kept getting delivered to my old address. Felix came by most weekends with snacks and stories. He'd fill me in on the ongoing disasters at my old house. Adrien had been kicked out of community college for cheating. My parents were constantly fighting about money, and the house was physically falling apart. He never pressured me to reconcile. He just kept showing up, a reminder that not all connections were transactional. 8 months after the emancipation, the first huge opportunity arrived. The owner of a medium-sized auto parts chain approached me about overhauling his entire system. 5 locations, all running different, ancient setups, and none of them talking to each other. He wanted unified inventory tracking and a modern POS system. This was massive, way beyond anything I had built before. I didn't tell him that. I quoted a price and a timeline. Then, spent the next 3 weeks learning everything I could about network systems and centralized database architecture. Felix was invaluable. He handled all the physical wiring and installation, while I focused on writing the custom software that tied everything together. We worked nights and weekends until the system ran smooth, stable, and completely reliable. When that system went live and actually worked flawlessly, processing real sales across 5 different towns, I realized I had been thinking too small. These blue-collar businesses didn't just need a quick fix or a band-aid on dying equipment. They needed custom, specialized solutions that were bulletproof, practical, and cheap compared to corporate offerings. I pivoted Vanlentini Systems completely. I started focusing exclusively on rugged POS and inventory systems for specific industries: auto parts stores, contractor supply shops, industrial equipment suppliers. The reputation I built was for systems that just worked, systems that lasted. By age 18, I had more work than I could handle alone. I hired 2 guys from the community college, giving them the kind of practical training I had always craved. We moved the operation out of my garage apartment into a proper shop space I rented from the same warehouse owner. One of the new hires, Mason, had a retail background and understood the user pain points, suggesting features like quick keys and shift reports that made our systems better. The Business Journal in the next county overran a small piece about local tech solutions, bringing in even more clients. My business was no longer a hobby. It was a real, functioning engine of growth. The payments continued. Every month, the required amount, and every dollar extra I could scrape together went to the credit card companies. The external validation was great, but the internal focus was always the same: hit zero. I didn't want to be tied to my past by a single cent of interest. I started a new hobby around age 19: woodworking. Working with my hands on non-digital projects, building a workbench, then a coffee table, helped clear my head. It was creation without the constant pressure of problem solving. It was pure, physical satisfaction. The real breakthrough came when I landed a contract with a regional hardware store chain. 12 locations, all needing system overhauls. I hired 3 more people and rented additional shop space. By the time I turned 22, I had a solid client base, reliable income, and a reputation for building the best blue-collar tech in the region. And then, about a month after my 23 birthday, it happened. I made the final, large principal payment. 6 years of grinding, living frugally, and dedicating every piece of energy to this single goal. I sat in my apartment staring at the screen. Account paid in full. $28,000 gone. I felt this strange, profound emptiness, like I had been running a marathon for half a decade, and crossing the finish line left me without gravity. Felix came by that night with takeout. "So, what now?" he asked, seeing the look on my face. "Now," I said, finally letting myself breathe, "I figure out what I actually want instead of just surviving." With the debt cleared, I started thinking long-term. I made my first real investment, buying a duplex that needed work. I spent 6 months fixing it up in my spare time, then rented out both units. Stable, passive income. I finally began looking for a property to live in. Somewhere that felt like mine. I was free, financially and legally. I had survived the attempt on my future and had built something real in the ashes. I believed I was untouchable. I was free. I was clean. I was untouchable. And that, of course, was exactly when the envelope arrived, proving they had simply been waiting for the harvest. Slept. With the debt cleared and the business stable, I had finally allowed myself a small measure of a normal life. I was spending my weekends on the woodworking projects I loved, and had recently started dating Elena Ramirez. She was smart, an engineer, and completely independent. She didn't need me for anything. Which, ironically, was why I trusted her more than anyone else outside of Felix. My life had structure, peace, and growth. For 6 years after the emancipation, contact with my immediate family had been zero. Only Felix provided updates about the ongoing disasters at home, the usual dysfunctional pattern of financial strain and conflict. Then, the invitation arrived. It was a plain, heavy envelope with a printed card inside. "You're invited to celebrate Leonard Vanlentini's retirement." My father was retiring from the plant, and apparently, they wanted me there to celebrate. I stared at the card for a long time. Everything in my gut screamed this was a bad idea, but the suddenness of the invitation, after so much silence, felt wrong. It felt calculated. Felix called that same day. "You get the invitation." "Yeah. You going?" "Mom's been asking if I thought you'd show up. Seems important to them." Against every self-protective instinct I had meticulously cultivated, I RSVP'd yes. I was curious, and morbidly. I wanted to see the wreckage of the life they had chosen. The retirement party was held at the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall in Fairmont. It was exactly the kind of event you'd expect for a factory worker. Bad coffee, grocery store sheet cake, and a slideshow of Dad's career that no one actually paid attention to. Walking in felt surreal. Conversations paused. Everyone was looking at me. The prodigal son, who had vanished years ago, now dressed in a suit that cost more than my dad made in a week. My parents approached me together. My dad had aged hard. He was grayer, heavier, and permanently hunched from years of physical labor. My mother had that same carefully maintained appearance. Her hair perfect, her makeup meticulous, but her eyes held a pinched, disappointed expression. "Eddie, glad you could make it," Dad said, his voice formal and distant. "Congratulations on the retirement," I replied. Adrien hung back, then slid over with a fake, wide smile. "Little bro. Long time. Heard your little business is doing okay." "That pays the bills," I said, offering nothing. They introduced me to Dad's co-workers as or other son who works with computers. Throughout the evening, I stayed on the periphery, watching. Something felt fundamentally off. The party seemed more expensive than it should have been. The sheet cake was custom. The hall was fully rented. Near the food table, I overheard my uncle talking to one of Dad's former co-workers. Now that Eddie's back in the picture, Leonard's hoping for some help. Kid's done well for himself. About time he stepped up for family. I moved away, catching fragments of other conversations. Plans for a big RV my dad supposedly bought. My mom mentioning a cruise they had booked. Adrien casually dropping that he just put a down payment on a condo in the city. None of it made sense for a man who had retired from a dying factory. Mrs. Peppers was there too. She shuffled up to me, holding a plate of sad-looking finger foods. "Interesting party," she murmured, leaning in slightly. "A lot of expensive choices for someone retiring from a factory job." I noticed that too. "Your parents have been telling everyone you're doing very well." "Very well indeed." The way she said the last phrase, slow and deliberate, was a clear warning. Driving back to my apartment that night, I couldn't shake the metallic taste of suspicion. The sudden invitation after years of silence. The extravagant expenses. The casual mentions of my success to their entire social circle. It felt wrong. It felt like staging. Then, 4 weeks later, while my father was supposedly enjoying his new retirement, a courier delivered a massive stack of papers to my shop. It was a legal complaint. Leonard Vanlentini, Marlene Vanlentini, and Adrien Vanlentini as plaintiffs, with me as the defendant. They were suing me for compensation. They claimed my success was built entirely on the early support and resources provided by the family, demanding a 35% ownership stake in Vanlentini Systems, plus $150,000 in damages for emotional distress and lost opportunities. Adrien's accompanying affidavit claimed I had stolen business opportunities that should have been his, that they had invested in me while he received nothing. Reading through page after page of fabricated garbage and outright lies, the retirement party suddenly snapped into perfect, cold focus. It wasn't a celebration. It was a setup. It was a calculated move to create a narrative of family reunion, gather information about my business, and soften up their legal target before they launched the attack. The party wasn't the reward for retirement. It was the investment in the lawsuit. They wanted to steal my company. I immediately called my business attorney, Julian. I forwarded him everything, feeling the familiar, cold surge of rage that always preceded action. His response after reviewing the documents was brief. "This is creative fiction, Eddie. They're claiming critical early support for development. They stole from me, opened credit cards in my name, and stuck me with the debt." "I know," Julian said. We have all that documented from your emancipation case. Their legal claims are garbage, but they aren't after a legal victory. They want a settlement. They're banking on you paying them off to avoid the hassle and potential damage to your business reputation. That realization that they saw my success as a weakness to be exploited for a cash settlement was the final insult. They hadn't evolved, they had only changed their method of theft from a credit card to a legal motion. I told Julian exactly what I told him 6 years prior. We fight this all the way. Spare no expense. They don't get a dollar. I wouldn't just defend my company. I was defending my life. They thought they were attacking my wallet. They were attacking the one thing I had built with my own hands. I decided I would give them a war, not a settlement. I assembled a legal team within 3 days. Julian, my business attorney, led it, and I brought back Marlene, the lawyer who handled my emancipation, for her institutional knowledge. Their assessment was clear legally. My parents' claims were garbage. The emancipation ruling was ironclad proof of financial exploitation, not support. But they warned me that family lawsuits get ugly fast, and my parents weren't looking for justice. They were looking for a payoff. They wanted me to settle to avoid the reputation damage and the hassle. That wasn't an option. I told my lawyers to fight this all the way. We spent 8 months in a relentless legal war. We discovered through the long, painful process of discovery just how calculated they had been. Adrien hadn't just used the party to gather intel. He had created fake LinkedIn profiles years earlier to connect with my clients, gathering information about project timelines and estimated revenues. My parents had been pumping Felix for information whenever he visited, asking casual questions about my expansion and my long-term plans. The most disturbing revelation was the evidence that someone had repeatedly attempted to access my business bank accounts, using security questions based on my childhood. Questions only family would know. Our IT guy traced the attempts to an IP address that matched my parents' internet provider. It was a tangible violation, proving they were willing to risk everything, even criminal charges, to gain control. I immediately implemented enhanced protections, changing every security question to something completely random and meaningless to my past. Felix felt terrible when he saw the evidence. I didn't know, he confessed. They just asked how you were doing, and I thought they actually cared. That maybe they missed you. Not your fault. I told him. They're good at playing people. You were just a means to an end. The lawsuit went semi-public, and a few clients did call, concerned about the stability of Vanlentini Systems. I had to personally reassure every one of them that the case was baseless and my business was solid, built on years of documented integrity. The discovery process utterly demolished my family's fabricated case. We found emails between my parents and Adrien going back almost 2 years, clearly plotting how to reconnect with me, specifically to pursue financial claims. My mother had been saving articles about my business, and Adrien had created a detailed spreadsheet estimating my company's worth based on client numbers and industry averages. They weren't reacting to my success, they were planning to steal it. During depositions, their claims evaporated under cross-examination. When asked about specific critical support they provided to my early business, my father claimed that letting me use the basement and the electricity for my workbench were significant contributions. My mother claimed she had provided emotional support and sacrifice. Adrien's testimony was almost farcical. When pressed about his claim that I had stolen opportunities from him, he couldn't articulate what those opportunities were. He was an entitled amateur who only saw what he lacked. The case finally went before Judge Eldridge. My parents' testimony grew desperate. My dad tried claiming he'd provided crucial business guidance, only to admit under cross-examination that the extent of this mentorship was telling me to work harder. My mother focused on emotional investment and sacrifice, but Marlene was ready. She countered with the credit card debt, the documented financial exploitation, and the cold fact that they had been extracting money from me since I was 15. When asked about their recent purchases, the RV, the cruise, Adrien's condo down payment, my father reluctantly admitted they had taken out a substantial loan based on anticipated settlement proceeds from the lawsuit. They were leveraged against my loss. After 8 months of legal maneuvering, Judge Eldridge issued his ruling. He dismissed the case entirely with a harsh opinion that called my family's claims demonstrably false and potentially fraudulent. He ordered them to pay my legal fees and court costs. The total amount was devastating to them. It would likely force them to sell the house they had tried to hold on to so fiercely. Outside the courthouse, I stood alone for a moment, waiting for Julian. Adrien rushed toward me. Security moved to intercept, but I waved them off. He stopped a few feet away, his face pale and angry. "This is ridiculous," he hissed. "We're family. You really gonna let them lose their house?" I looked him straight in the eye. My voice was calm and utterly devoid of emotion. "I started my own business at 14, paid off my debts, and bought a house in cash. Then my parents sued me for taking the life my brother deserved, and tried to sabotage what I'd built. I fought back, and made sure they regret it. I'm not doing anything to them, Adrien. They did this to themselves." My dad was standing nearby, looking defeated, his shoulders slumped. "We raised you. Gave you everything." "No," I replied, my final word on the matter. "You took everything." I turned and walked away from that courthouse, finally feeling an emptiness. But this time, it was the clean emptiness of having won. I won the war, but I forgot that a defeated enemy is simply a desperate enemy. They had failed to destroy my independence, so they focused on destroying what I had built. 2 years after the lawsuit verdict, life had settled into a predictable rhythm. I was focused on growth, and my relationship with Alina was solid and steady. The house was sold, the legal fees paid, and my parents were off the radar. Then, on a slow Tuesday morning, Felix called, his voice tight with alarm. "You need to hear this," he said. "Adrien is working for Computra Solutions now. Computra was my biggest competitor. Similar services, but they charged more and had a reputation for overselling features clients didn't need." "So?" I replied, trying to stay calm. "So he's been calling your clients, Eddie. He's offering them migration packages to switch to Computra. He's using information he got from the lawsuit discovery. Client lists, project details, everything." I sat down hard. That information was supposed to have been sealed by the court. Apparently, Adrien had kept digital copies before the seal was official. He was now actively trying to destroy Vanlentini Systems, using my own client data against me. This wasn't passive theft or financial entitlement. This was deliberate, personal sabotage. I called Julian immediately. He confirmed that, while ethically repulsive, Adrien hadn't technically violated any criminal laws by keeping copies of the discovery. He was protected by the flimsy shield of normal sales outreach. Over the next 2 weeks, the damage started. 3 of my long-term clients called, asking about Computra's offers. Adrien was telling them Vanlentini Systems was financially unstable, looking to sell, and that they should switch before my business went under. All lies, but effective when delivered by someone with insider knowledge. I realized I couldn't fight this in a courtroom. I had to fight it on the street, using the one thing they lacked: integrity. I went on the offensive. I reached out to every single client, personally. I brought Felix along to installations. We spent 2 weeks visiting shops face to face, demonstrating new features, and offering extended warranties at no cost. It was a move of aggressive vulnerability, opening myself up to the community I served. Most clients appreciated the direct contact. Several mentioned Adrien's calls seemed desperate, which made them suspicious of Computra. But Adrien wasn't done. He started spreading rumors that Vanlentini Systems was under investigation for fraud. A complete fabrication, but one designed to damage my reputation quickly. Mrs. Peppers heard the rumor from someone at her church and called me immediately to warn me. But the rumor spreading actually backfired. One of my oldest clients, Rick from the auto parts chain, called after hearing the rumors. He'd checked with the Better Business Bureau and the state licensing board. There was nothing on file about me at all. I explained the entire toxic family history to Rick, detailing the identity theft, the emancipation, and the lawsuit. There was a long silence on the line. "Your own brother is trying to tank your business," Rick finally said. "That's really low. I'm going to make some calls." Within a week, the blue-collar business community had spread the word about Adrien's tactics and the truth of my family's ongoing vendetta. Computra's reputation took a hit just for employing him. Several shop owners called me specifically to say they had shut Adrien down immediately and wouldn't be dealing with Computra. Adrien's gambit didn't just fail, it strengthened my position. Clients who had been casual became fiercely loyal. New clients approached me specifically because they'd heard how I had handled the attack with transparency and superior service. Computra fired Adrien after 6 weeks. The real win came 3 months later. The regional manager for one of the largest equipment rental companies in the Midwest called about a massive partnership. 43 locations needing a full system overhaul. "We heard about the situation with your competitor," he said during our meeting. "That situation showed us you've got integrity and you show up for your clients when things get tough. We're interested in a contract for 43 locations." It was the biggest opportunity I had ever faced, revenue that would double the size of my business. We negotiated for 2 weeks, and the final deal was a 3-year contract. I sat in my office afterward, looking at the contract, trying to process the magnitude of the win. My reputation, tested in fire, had become my most valuable asset. My father and brother had tried to burn down my future. Instead, their malicious intent had forged the very shield that protected it. 2 weeks later, the final anonymous attack arrived: an email from the state licensing board. A formal complaint had been filed against Vanlentini Systems, alleging unsafe installation practices and misleading clients. It cited specific projects from years ago, mentioning details about my early business structure, even the basement workspace at my parents' house. Information only someone with intimate knowledge of my past would have. "This is your family, Eddie," Julian confirmed. Yes, of course it was them. They simply never gave up. We filed a detailed, documented response proving every installation met code, including client testimonials, and showing our spotless safety record. The licensing board investigated for 2 weeks, and the complaint was dismissed as baseless. Even after everything, they were still trying to reach into my life and destroy what I had built, and still failing. The community's backing reinforced the most important truth I had learned: reputation isn't built on what your family says about you. It's built on what you actually do. The kid who had felt like a waste of space had built a system of integrity that was completely unassailable. The storm was over. What remained was the quiet satisfaction of a life earned, built on a foundation no one could ever touch. The business expansion, after landing the 43-location contract, happened fast. Within 3 months, we hired 3 more people and leased a larger shop space. Instead of renting, I bought the building outright. It made financial sense, but more importantly, owning the space, knowing no one could ever take it away, felt right. Around the same time, I made Felix Moreno a partner, giving him a 20% ownership stake. He had been there from the beginning, helping me hide cash behind a water heater, and then helping me build my systems at 4 in the morning. He deserved a real stake in the freedom we had created. We signed the partnership papers at a coffee shop. "This is really happening," Felix said, looking at the documents. "Yeah," I confirmed. "Couldn't have done it without you." "Sure you could have," he shrugged. "But it would have just taken longer." By age 29, we had over 200 active clients across 5 states. Vanlentini Systems, the business I had started in my parents' basement, was now legitimate, profitable, and growing. That year, I finally found the house I wanted. It was a small, unassuming place on 2 acres outside of town, built in the 1960s. It needed work, but it had good bones. I walked in and wrote a check. No mortgage, just a clean transfer. The physical, final embodiment of my financial sovereignty. I spent 8 months fixing it up, with Felix helping with the heavy demolition. Elena and I got engaged soon after. She saw the scars from my past, but she also saw the stability I had painstakingly built, and she trusted that I was ready to let my guard down for her. Mrs. Peppers, of course, started bringing wedding magazines, along with her usual supply of home-cooked meals. Felix still filled me in occasionally on the family situation. Adrien was stuck working retail, living with our parents in a cramped apartment. They had lost their house and all their retirement savings pursuing their lawsuit against me. My mother was exhausted from working multiple jobs, and my father's health was failing. It was a disaster of their own making, a consequence of relentless greed. I listened, but I never engaged. Their problems were not mine to solve. Standing on the back porch of my paid-off house, watching the evening sun set across my own 2 acres, I realized the full scope of my success. The house was paid off. The business was thriving. I had a loyal partner in Felix and an incredible fiancée in Elena. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't the lawsuit victory, the debt payoff, or even the contract that doubled my business. The best revenge was simply building a beautiful, unshakable life that they could not touch, and that proved their original assessment of me. The quiet, difficult kid who was just a waste of space was fundamentally and completely wrong. I was free. I was content. I was sovereign.